So, hi guys, this is the first in our series of open conversations. So, we're going to be having a range of chats around different issues related to men's health and wellness. The first one we're doing is on hair loss, and I'm joined by our medical director, Dr. Mike. And we've got one of our customers, Mark, who is an influencer and stylist. He's one of our customers for finasteride as well. So, thanks guys for joining.
Yeah, no problem.
So hair loss is a really interesting subject. It's something that I've obviously done a lot of research into as part of doing Man Behind the Mirror. And I'm luckily not sort of losing hair yet. If it was, I would definitely try and do something about it. But it's quite an interesting topic because doing the research, 65% of guys, two out of three men by the age of 35 are going to start losing their hair. And I think 62%, there was a stat that I found, 62% of guys that are losing their hair say that they get negative self-esteem as a consequence of it. But less than 10% of men are actually seeking treatment for hair loss. So it seems to be quite a big disparity between guys that are actually feeling that, oh God, I'm starting to lose my hair, and actually taking action and doing something about it. So it's quite an interesting, I guess, societal issue, really. Why aren't men doing something about it? So it'd be good to chat about that and sort of the different treatments that are out there. I think there is a bit of a lack of awareness. So Mark, are you okay telling us a bit around sort of your journey, I guess, and how you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So I think I wasn't really aware that I was losing my hair. I think when I was about 21 or 22, I was working in Dublin as a visual merchandiser, and I was doing something where I think I was bent down. And I mean, bearing in mind, when I was in my teens and early 20s, I dyed my hair every shade of every color you can imagine. I was peroxide blonde, I was silver, I had a black, I had different shades of brown. And at this stage, I think it was actually like a copper, like a red. And I wasn't even aware. And I think I would bend down to something, and my boss at the time just pointed it, and in front of everyone said, "Oh, look, you're going bald." And I nearly died. I was like, what? Because obviously you can't see the top of your head. So, I wasn't really obviously looking at it very much. But this then was my first kind of consciousness of it. Now, it does run in my family. So one of the things I want to talk to you today about, Mike, is like genetics and, does it run in families and things like that. I think I find that very interesting. But when also on that point, when people say that it's genetic or it runs in families, then you automatically assume that there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way that it is. It's in the blood, it's in the genes, and there's nothing you can do. That's actually not categorically untrue. So that was the start of my hair loss journey. And I suppose over the years, without kind of having any knowledge about what you could do about it, it just progressively got worse. And for me, it affected the crown. And I'd always had like quite a sharp widow's peak, so it wasn't as obvious that it was coming away from the hairline at the front. But then I started to notice that it was, and I think it was probably when I was maybe 24 or 25, and then I started to really research what I could be doing preventing it, because I wasn't even aware that you could regrow. So I was trying to prevent it, really. And that led me down a few different paths, like herbal remedies, topical remedies. And I suppose just through trial and error, the one that really worked for me was finasteride. And then within that, there was obviously a lot of research done on my part, and I looked online a lot. You obviously need a prescription for it, and I had to get one at the time, try and get a repeat prescription for it. But I wanted to understand it myself and understand the side effects, because all I'd ever heard about it was, oh, it causes erectile dysfunction, it causes a lack of sex drive, it causes depression, it causes this. And it seemed to have a bit of a negative kind of reputation, a bit like Roaccutane that they keep prescribed for people who have very severe acne. And thankfully I never suffered with that. But all I remember is when we were in school, like they used to talk to you about, when you do RE or any kind of classes around, kind of well-being, etc. And they used to say, look, if you're ever prescribed this particular drug, that it does cause depression. So, all of those kinds of things were coming at me, and I was like, oh God, do you really want to go down that path? And also, it was like, do you want to be on a tablet for kind of forever? So there's a lot of internal conversations that you have to have, or that I had. But for me, it was the only thing that worked, the one thing that worked. So I'm now 34. I'm going to be 34 this year. I know I don't look it, but I think I'm probably out of place now. It's actually taken me a good 10 years to get to a place where I've kind of accepted it. It's something that I just have to put into my daily routine. I, we were discussing earlier before we started recording that, you were saying, Mike, how, it was an 8-year journey for you and it was a difficult decision to make. It wasn't that you just, went bald one day. It took that amount of time. And I think what's interesting is that some people accept it, and it might take time, but they've accepted it and they've moved on. Like I was saying, my it does run in my family, and my dad is bald and my brother has just shaped his hair really, really close, and it really, really suits them. But it just wasn't for me. I didn't want that. I wanted to fight it, I suppose. And that's kind of my attitude to most things. If you tell me I can't have something, then I just try and get it even more. So I just wanted to, I think that, and that's what's led me to wanting to do this and to have an honest discussion with you guys about it, and know why A, you wanted to set up the company, and B, Mike, like, you could more insight into, how it ends, and even talking about your own journey. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
So, I mean, it's interesting in terms of the company. So my co-founder, Chris, the germ and the idea for doing Man Behind the Mirror came from hair loss. So that was like the first sort of anchor product and product category that we were really focused on from the beginning. And it's interesting that you say actually around sort of that first moment when you realised you were losing your hair came from someone pointing out, almost being a bit mean, to be honest. It's like that is still a lot of. It's a banter thing, isn't it? Like, guys will take the piss out of their friends losing their hair, and I think that is, at the time, obviously, if you're just chatting with mates, that's just banter and it's just joking. But I think that if you are losing your hair, I think people don't really realise actually, God, that does affect your confidence, and it can make a bit of an issue. Yeah, because so when Chris was losing his
hair, within that as well, though, it only takes one person. I have one other friend who wouldn't suffer with it the same way that I would, and hasn't really lost very much at all. And he is a little bit open about it as well. And I think just having that one person you can confide in, and then, he asks me about my hair loss journey, and he asks me, oh, well, what are you doing? And what have you tried? And just that alone is huge.
It's almost like permission to actually do something about it, because I think a lot of guys maybe think it's too vain as well, seeking treatment. And like in the news when Rooney got hair transplants, it's almost like taking the piss out of Rooney for doing something about his hair, sort of thing. And it's interesting. But when Chris was losing his hair, he had a sort of similar experience of that sort of panic. It's, oh God, I'm starting to lose my hair, it's a sign of aging, all that sort of thing. And I found that the process of seeking treatment really, really difficult. Lots of misinformation online. I'm not sure how you found that in terms of, how difficult did you find actually figuring out that finasteride was out there. But he found it a very difficult process. There's lots of sites that will, claim to have like miracle cures for hair loss, and there's no real medical basis behind them. And I think that again just contributes to this uncertainty, or what do I do? I can't, there's not that trusted platform.
Yeah, completely. I think it's taken me, like I said, nearly 10 years to kind of find a rhythm or a routine. And I would say it's only in the last 2 years that I probably have found that. So like you, Mike, it's taken about 8 years to kind of get to a place where I've accepted it's part of my daily routine, but also what actually works specifically for me, because not one product is going to resolve it for everybody. You have to find a routine that works with your daily life, but also something that you're comfortable with and you're confident in using. Because like you said, Matt, there's so many things. I mean, I even, just from looking at your Instagram page and from looking at your website and things like that, you automatically then get spam for so many other things associated to it. So like I'm getting these miracle oils now as Instagram and Facebook, and I'm kind of going, oh, here we go again. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what should you use and what shouldn't you use? And I think, like you said, it's very difficult to wade through all of that noise and actually say, look, there is medical, or there is actually scientific basis or scientific grounds behind what you guys are doing. And that's why I'm kind of like, this is actually a good one. These are good people to align with, because you can help, dispel all that myth and all the BS around it.
So it's kind of you wanting to kind of chat about things then today because you've had these negative experiences and taboos, and trying to just break them down a little bit. that kind of the aim, really.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So really, it sounds like you've had your experiences and you want to kind of break down that taboo so other people feel more comfortable talking about hair loss and seeking treatment and things like that.
Yeah, completely. It's not something that you need to feel ashamed about, and people will try and shame you. And other people who have gone bald would be the people in my life now that would be a bit more, negative about it, would be people who have already been through the process and have, shaved their heads and have decided to just go with the flow, I suppose. And they kind of take the piss because they say, oh, you're just trying to hold on to it, you're trying to retain it. And obviously nobody wants to look older, nobody wants to look bad. And the big thing kind of for somebody like me who's grown their hair out now is that, if it is down and it's a windy day, it's like, oh God, are people going to think, what an idiot, why doesn't he just shave his head? But at the end of the day, do I care what people think? No, I care what I think, and I do what I have to do to make myself feel good and make myself feel, confident. And I think, yeah, you're right, Mike. Today, or this is really about allowing other people to have that voice and say, you know what, just get rid of the noise and do what's right for me. So I do have a couple of questions about, hair loss specifically, and maybe this will help other people to understand. And then, they can make that decision and subscribe and get that information from you guys, because I find it really valuable. And if it means then that, like, it's taken me 8 years to find a rhythm or to find something that actually works, and if somebody else can find that in a few days, then that's even, that's
I think, I mean, I can definitely relate to a lot of the things that you're saying. I know it's, you've got hair, I haven't got hair, so it's you might feel that it's quite a contrasting opinion, because you see someone who's bald and it's just like, well, they've made that decision, they don't have to worry about that anymore. But I think I was 21 when I think a girlfriend at uni first noticed that I was losing hair on my crown, and I was horrified, to be honest. I felt so embarrassed. And I know that another girlfriend of someone whose boyfriend was losing their hair, he was like so ashamed that he was looking at hair transplants at like 24, and he need to get his hair sorted and all this. And I didn't really know anything about hair loss or treatment or anything at that stage. And then, I suppose when you're, especially more in your lower 20s, people, you do joke about these things. And then you start trying to learn what you can do to cover it up, because you do feel ashamed, especially when your friends have all got kind of full heads of hair. And so at that point, I think I started doing all my research for treatment. Ended up in lots of appointments, in private clinics with some guy, saying it'll be £15,000 to have a hair transplant. We can do it for £8,000. You might need another one in 6 months. And I was still a student, and then it was like, oh, you can take these tablets and have this laser treatment. And I was just like, so I didn't do any of that. I just left it actually for a couple of years later, and then carried on, I suppose, just keeping tabs on different treatments and different things that you could do. And then as my hair loss got worse, then it was causing me a lot of anxiety. It was building into everything I was doing. And I started using, the powders that you can use to cover up hair loss, the ones that can bind to like the transparent hairs. So before taking any medication, I started doing that, because at first it was kind of a small thing. It was fine. I didn't do it that often. And then it became a routine thing that I did for years, but it was so impactful on my lifestyle, because I was like ashamed to tell girls that if I was dating, like going on holidays, going swimming, all these things, it was having such a massive effect on my lifestyle. So that journey for me, it was hard, and it was hard to admit, to be honest, for a very, very long time, all that stuff. I found it really difficult. And then in and amongst that time, I started taking finasteride, and I took it for about 2.5 years. But I wasn't particularly, the way that I took it at that time, it was a slightly different dose, and you have to take a half tablet every couple of days. And I wasn't that great at taking it, to be honest. and I was also having kind of some other family stuff happening at the time, and kind of my mood was a bit up and down. So I thought, actually, I'm not sure I should be taking it at this time. Maybe I'll just stop. But then obviously things progressed, and I started looking a lot more into hair transplants, England versus Turkey, all this stuff. I'm sure people that have looked at these things understand that kind of process. And I think, I think at one point I went out to meet some friends and I bought a cap just because I didn't want my hair to be unsure. And then afterwards I came home and thought, I can't do this anymore, and I just shaved my hair off. That was, that's 21. I'm 32 now, so that's 11 years of lots of anxiety and stuff that I found very hard to deal with, to be honest. And that's all related to hair. Completely just related to my hair. Had a huge effect on my life.
Yeah. And it's crazy that something that would seem so insignificant just causes that much grief and that much stress.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate. And I think for me as well, because in my teens, my hair was such a way, because I was in an all-boys Catholic school, so you had a uniform, and there was very limited resources in terms of self-expression. And I think for me, it became a source of, it became almost like a calling card, or a business card. It kind of became a part of who I was, and I think from that angle as well, for me, it was a bit kind of, oh God. But also being kind of in the fashion and beauty side of things, I also really, really enjoy working with hair. I really enjoy it. Like, I used to blow dry friends. I'm not qualified now hairdresser, but I used to blow dry my female friends' hair. I used to, help style my male friends' hair. I've even been known to cut some people's hair. I'm sure their hairdresser hated me, but I really actually enjoy working with hair and cosmetics. You see on my blog, I do try and do some things around skincare, because I absolutely love skincare and anything to do with, I suppose, self-care.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely can relate to that. It really has a mental, or puts a lot on your mental health. It was really, it can really choke you, and it can make it.
Yeah.
I said to another friend the other day, it can mean a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, a bad year. And, it's almost like you give it that power. So like, now let's take that back. And how do I take that back? And how I have, is by using, I use finasteride now for, God, probably 5 years on and off. And like that, it's like when you have stopped taking it is when you obviously see the hair begin to fall out again. But I have no doubt in my mind, if I hadn't been taking it, that I would probably be in a similar situation to you, and I probably would have just shaved it off. Like, I've been lucky in the sense that I've managed to save quite a lot by starting early.
Yeah. And what's your journey been like on finasteride? Do you find that the hair is thicker, or is it completely halted any hair loss, or what's it been like?
I've never actually properly recorded it, which is bad on my part. I've only started this time around because I figured, if I'm going to go down this journey of being open with people and talking about it, then I probably should know more about my own, patterns and hair growth stages and cycles. I can see now, since I've begun again, and I think I started at the beginning of the year, so roughly 5-6 months, I'd say I've been back on it, and I have a swath of baby hairs that I hadn't noticed before. And that could be for two reasons. It could be because I'm a bit more educated about it now, and I suppose I'm a bit more serious about it over the last few years. Or it could be the fact that my hair is now kind of shoulder length when it's down. So it could just be that I'm seeing them more, because there's such a contrast there. Whereas prior to this, I mean, the reason why I grew my hair out in the first place was because I got to a stage where I was that confident with the treatment. Before that, like, if I show you photographs from 2.5-3 years ago, my hair was constantly short, very, very short.
That's what I did, yeah.
When I moved to London first 6 years ago, I was bleaching it because it would look thicker, because there was no contrast between the scalp and the hair. So it sounds counterproductive, but my hairdresser was at the time saying, you know what, when your hair grows, it's strong because it's, you're only dyeing the regrowth, that kind of way. So it wasn't really weakening the hair. If you're not dyeing over the or bleaching over the bleach, let's say. So I've done everything to try and disguise, etc. And I think I got to a place where I was very happy with the results that I was seeing. And it was through taking finasteride and also vitamins. So again, based on research, I went and I did my own little research online, and I was looking at the things that hair essentially is made up of, and the things that perhaps you could be lacking in your diet that could contribute to healthier hair growth cycles and healthier hair strands. But what I actually am really interested in now, and the research that I'm doing right now at this moment in time, is based on actually regrowth and actually re-energizing dormant follicles, or follicles that perhaps maybe have just gone to sleep rather than have disappeared. And that's really so I'm starting that kind of journey now. But with Man Behind the Mirror, what's working for me is the finasteride tablet and the hair gummies, because the gummies then alleviate the need to go and buy. I was taking about 7 other supplements a day. So, and again, we'll talk about this in a minute, but I want to talk to you about, essentially what hair loss is and how it starts, or what causes it. And then I think we've already discussed why we think, one of my questions was, why do you think men find it difficult to talk about? But I think we've already discussed that. But if you can talk to me a little bit about maybe what actually causes it.
I think the difficulty is just kind of the way we're socialized with appearances and hair, a lot of it. There's lots of myths about why you lose hair. You're scrubbing your hair too harshly, you're wearing caps too much, using the wrong shampoos. There's lots of things like that, but again, dyeing your hair, but these things don't really cause hair loss unless something that you're doing is having more of a traumatic effect on the scalp. So say if you were wearing a hat very frequently, it was very, very tight, then that can cause some alopecia in that area because it's causing a stress effect on the scalp. But really, the majority of hair loss is genetic, and that does. I know that people think look to your mother's, look to your granddad on your mum's side, but like with a lot of genetics, it's more complicated than that. It can be just a mixture of genes that have passed through a family. It doesn't mean that those people in the family necessarily need to be that old for you to then start losing your hair. But and everybody naturally will lose hair as well with age in the majority of cases. So it's just a mixture usually of age and your genetic susceptibility of your hair follicles to certain hormones.
So the difference in balding, for example, is alopecia is, a stress on the follicle or something traumatic which causes you to lose a portion of or all of your hair. But male pattern baldness is something very different. It's like a specific to certain areas on the head or on the scalp. Isn't that true?
So the androgenic alopecia is a male pattern baldness, and then you can get baldness in areas which is more from something, either from actual emotional stress can trigger that, or certain kinds of autoimmune disease, or you can have pressure effect on the scalp can do that as well. But you can find if you're going through particularly stressful times, you can lose hair, which will then regrow as well. If you're in a emotionally in a state of crisis, or you're going through something quite traumatic, or like starvation or something like that, you can lose hair through stresses, which will then regrow. But that is different kind of hair loss to the male pattern baldness, which is kind of it fits that pattern of crown, vertex, things like that, and it is just slowly progressive over time.
So explain to me the difference there. Why won't that grow back, whereas something caused by stress or trauma might?
So the reason that is because the DHT, so the dihydrotestosterone effect on the follicle, is causing shrinking of the follicle. And when a follicle shrinks down, the hair becomes thinner and more transparent, and then eventually will die. So usually people have 1 to 4 hair follicle, 1 to 4 hairs in a follicle, but that will lessen with time and with the effects of DHT.
And DHT is a hormone, correct?
Yeah, so DHT is, we produce testosterone for loads of reasons, for kind of sexual maturity and growth and things like that. And DHT is one of the hormones that affects certain tissues in the body when testosterone is broken down. And unfortunately, hair is one of those things that it affects. But once a hair follicle is shrunken down, that, without blocking the effect of DHT, that follicle's not going to then start to regrow. So that is a more permanent change. Whereas something where it's related to stress, you're not actually affecting their hair follicle size. The hair follicles are not shrinking down. It's more that you've just got lots of circulating stress hormones, or you've caused a bit of damage in one area. So that will just heal up and improve. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So the DHT is a hormone that we all produce.
Yeah.
From testosterone, the hormone testosterone. So it's like a sub hormone kind of.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
A derivative of testosterone.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's strangling or stopping the blood flow really to the hair follicle.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So I know one of the questions that I answered in the Q&A was about finasteride and hair regrowth, which is, I know you said you were interested in that. But I think I mentioned this to Matt, that when you do get that shrunken follicle and the hair becomes thin and transparent, you still have hair there. So when you start using things like minoxidil or finasteride that help improve the blood flow and expand that follicle, the hair will thicken and the colour will come back into the hair. So it will look like you have actually got more hair. The hair will appear thicker and denser, unless you've completely gone bald and there's no hair left there anymore. But that doesn't mean that you always get regrowth with finasteride, but you usually nearly always get thickening of the hair.
You always get.
It's a bit crackly. So it doesn't always mean that you regrowth with finasteride. I think some medical studies kind of quote that around 50 to 60% of people will get new hairs growing from a follicle. But for your hair to look denser and those transparent hairs to then recolour, so it looks like you have got more hair, that a lot of studies usually have that around kind of 80 to 90% of people taking the medication.
Okay, so you would recommend then yourself using something else along with the finasteride to kind of increase that blood flow?
Oh no, well, so if you use that in combination with something like minoxidil, that's kind of the best combination you can do to help prevent hair loss and increase your hair density. I think one of the questions that we got asked was, will I definitely regrow hair? So the quick answer is no. The majority of patients will actually regrow some hair, but you will and should get thickening of the hair and increased density, so it will look like you have grown more hair.
Okay. And then just in terms of male pattern hair loss, so you said there earlier that it was usually genetic, but what other factors in your opinion can contribute to it? So is there anything that perhaps people should be aware of in terms of, stopping doing something that could be exacerbating it? For example, before they start their treatment, is there something, or if treatment is a little bit still in their mind, but they're not ready to take the plunge, is there other things that they can be doing to prevent it, or to, I suppose, to kind of help?
Yeah, so I mean, hair, I think you touched on it before when you said you were looking into kind of the dietary side of things. But there are lifestyle factors, and hair is made of certain minerals and be grown from certain vitamins that you have in the diet. So if you're deficient in certain things, then hair regrowth won't happen, or it can contribute to hair loss. And there's kind of mixed evidence on this, but it always kind of builds into healthy lifestyle. If you're if you're overweight and you're smoking and you're drinking and all these things, then there is kind of studies that show that this is, it's not good for hair growth, that you will lose hair faster. But I believe the majority of the process of male pattern baldness is it is hereditary.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think when I started to look into, what potentially you could be missing in diet and things like that, or what hair is actually made up of, it's biotin, things like biotin and vitamin B12 and folic acid and things like that. And they were the things that I looked at, and I was taking them in conjunction with the finasteride. And I think it was really then, and I started to grow my hair longer, that people were stopping me. People I worked with were like, what have you done? And when I'd go home to Dublin, like, people would say, have you had a hair transplant? And I was absolutely no, and it was the combination of both. But I really felt that it was using that side of it as well, like the lifestyle side of it as well. Like, it's obviously, you can sit here and preach, and obviously as a lifestyle, and menswear influencer, I do talk a lot about, having a healthier lifestyle and exercising and things like that. But I'm also not a slave to it. I'm not. I do drink. I drink alcohol. I am Irish, but I like to have a good time. But I suppose I'm lucky in the sense that I've always prioritized sleep as well. So people do ask about skincare and about my skin and things like that, and I say, well, I'm very, very lucky in that respect, because I need 8 hours sleep a day, and I will fall asleep no matter what. I could be in the middle of a party, and if I want to go to sleep, I'll go to sleep. It's just something that happens. But I think it's really, really important that people understand that side of it as well, and that's why I asked. So and even in terms of that, I think you touched on it earlier. So I have diet underlined. You've already covered smoking and genetics and health issues. Obviously, other health issues can contribute to it, but also mental health. And that's something that we discussed earlier as well. So like anxiety and stress and stressful situations or traumatic situations, or, in the family, or if you've lost your job, or if you're really stressed about money, they all obviously exacerbate, male pattern baldness or male pattern hair loss. And I think it's a really good, it was really good that you mentioned it earlier about, anxiety, and that, in turn your hair loss was causing you anxiety. And I think it's done the same for me in the past. I'm better at kind of handling it now, but when you're 21, 22, and you're going through even what the word anxiety or anxious means, it took me a while to actually understand, because it's something that's taboo. Men can't talk about these things and can't talk about being anxious or stressed or having kind of any emotional distress. And I think for me, what broke it down, if you actually look at anxiety and the physical side of anxiety. So if you stop treating, obviously it's a mental health issue, but if you stop thinking about it in that respect and actually think about it, break it down in terms of what it actually does to your body, that's for me is when it clicked, and I kind of went, whoa. It was giving me irritable bowel syndrome. I was very stressed at work at the time, and it was giving me bowel syndrome. It was giving me, obviously it was exacerbating hair loss in me. And that is when I went, so the anxiety is also contributing to all of these things. So what would you say to people who feel that maybe that's the case, but they're not sure if they can really approach that subject or what to do about that?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, and again, you mentioned it's more to do with men. We don't necessarily seek treatment unless it's something is really kind of pushing us to be overwhelming, and that can be with hair, definitely with mental health. It's not even something that I think I spoke to partners and things at the time, because I was too kind of embarrassed. Men generally just don't seek help. It's not something that you feel comfortable talking to your mates about when you're in your 20s, to be honest, because all you want to do is for people not to notice that you're losing hair.
Completely, yeah. All you want is for people to not notice anything that might make you stand out or be different, I guess. And I think in hindsight is a really useful tool. And I think you're 32 now, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm 33. I'm going to be 34 in August. And I think if there was one thing I could tell my younger self or myself 10 years ago, it would be to stop caring what other people do.
Yeah, I know.
But here we are. So we've already spoken about DHT. I wanted to ask you about that. You've spoken about that, I think, really, really well. And I giving people a better understanding of that. What would you recommend, say, for somebody who didn't necessarily want to take the medication or want to go on finasteride? What would you recommend?
No, I think that then it's a case of, those lifestyle changes, they don't have to be huge changes, and these things are usually only manageable in moderation. It's not saying stop drinking, start running marathons. It's, just kind of cut down, eat kind of healthier food if you can, try and maybe do a bit more exercise. And I think I talked with the man behind the mirror guys quite a lot about how amazing exercise can be, even if it's going for a walk. If you're having a stressful day full of anxiety and you take a 30-minute walk, it breaks that entire cycle. You're probably going to sleep better. It kind of just put through all that stuff. So,
Completely.
I think set yourself manageable lifestyle changes and just be more aware of what you're doing in your lifestyle, rather than, I have to do these, or no, I've not achieved these. Yeah,
completely. I think that's so true, and I think you need to shout that from the rooftops, because we automatically we're really guilty. I am an influencer as well, and you kind of do worry. Oh God, is the stuff too perfect? Is it unattainable? And I think what I try to do is get a balance. You'll find me going for a walk or with my friends' dogs, or you'll find me, with greasy hair, slicked back, doing something, and then you'll also find the polished kind of stuff, which is me expressing myself and my creativity as a stylist, for example. So I would hope that people would see the difference. And what I would want to say to others is to really not look too much at the really polished stuff, kind of see it for what it is, and actually take it with a pinch of salt. And think, like you talked about earlier, setting yourself manageable or attainable goals. Like your goals are, you dream big for sure, but your goals in terms of certain health things, and certainly for me to do with exercise, or changing, like for example, changing diet. I'm not a person who really eats a lot of seafood or eats a lot of fish, but when I read that salmon and that certain oily fish is really good for hair regrowth, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to start eating salmon now. I'm going to have to start eating. And slowly but surely I did change my own opinion about certain things, and it's how you cook things. But I didn't go all out and go to a seafood buffet and start wolfing down oysters and prawns and stuff. Like, some things still don't really feel that great to me. So, but you introduce things in a way that's manageable for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, So like, if you're struggling with hair loss, if you're struggling with, anxiety or myopathy, take baby steps to manage that. So you said going for a walk, like it's so key, opening up to somebody, anybody that will, even if there is an influencer, like I'm so grateful and thankful that people feel that they can send me a message on Instagram and say, oh my God, I'm so glad you highlighted that. I feel the same way. And we've seen it a lot with, say, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, when, we posted, or I posted about that, and people came back to me and went, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way, or I hadn't thought about this. It's the same with things like this. It's just those small little conversations that help you kind of alter your own behaviors and alter your own attitudes, and you kind of go, actually, this is attainable if I take it one step at a time. And so we have actually spoke about a lot of the topics that I want to talk about. So like,
all right,
a lot of the things so we spoke a little bit about vitamins and supplements and things like that. Is there any evidence to suggest that perhaps you can overdose, or you can take too many of these, do you think?
So, I mean, the general rule for things like this is everything in moderation. I think when people do take too much of things like vitamin tablets, unless it's really to excess, your body will only absorb and process so much, and the rest will just, it will be excreted. So it's quite hard to overdose on things like vitamins, unless you are taking far above the recommended amount. So I don't think so. And by taking them, you're not really good. Do you mean if you're just taking them at a normal dose daily, is that going to go over into like a folate level?
Yeah, I think one of the main ones I think that you should be taking for hair loss is selenium. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And selenium can also be found in things like, I think oily fish and nuts. Brazil nuts, I think, have a lot of selenium in them. I think when I read something the other day that had hinted that selenium can, if you take too much of it, can increase the risk of prostate cancer in men. but I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah, I'm not 100% with that. I'd have to look at that. But with generally speaking, the amount that you do get in vitamin supplements, they're not in amounts that are going to be in any way detrimental to your body unless you're, say, with a vitamin D tablet, unless you were taking kind of 10 a day rather than 1 a day. Your body will just process what it needs to process out of that, and the rest will be excreted.
Thought so. And then the same, I mean, in terms of finasteride, so talk me through some of the side effects to that you're aware of or that people have talked to you about, because there's obviously it's listed in the literature you get with them, but there are some more prevalent than others. But is it really a lot of people that are experiencing these, or is it, 1%, 10%?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, there's lots of different studies that you can read. I think most of them have side effects of the medication, usually in under 5% of people taking it. Of those, when you look at some of the larger studies, I think there's a cross study. I think it came out maybe 2 or 3% of patients might get some side effects. And then that's broken down further. So the typical ones that people worry about are mood changes. So definitely if it can lower mood or and sexual dysfunction is the other one that people worry about. The percentages are low, but it is acting on a system in the body, like with any medication that you take. So there is always going to be a percentage of people who will experience side effects. How have you found it in terms of side effects? Have you ever experienced anything?
I don't think so, no. I was going to ask you just in terms of the one with you talked about low mood or depression and things like that, but how would somebody be aware of that if they were taking it? Because I would assume you as a person wouldn't necessarily be very aware that your mood had certainly dropped. Would that be quite a significant decrease, do you think, or would it take time for that to happen?
I think it could completely just be, it could be a scale really of symptoms that you could have. It could be anything from very mild and not noticing to, some people probably it would have more of an effect on. Things that you would look out for with mood changes is, being more irritable and emotional, having less energy, feeling like you don't want to do things as much, having less enthusiasm for things. I think if you start noticing those behaviours, I think the people around you probably potentially would pick them up before you do. But that might be a sign that it could be medication related, and it might not be the best thing, and you probably should stop the medication or speak to GP at that point.
And do you think there's any correlation between the finasteride and maybe an increase? Another thing that people worry about is an increase in your risk of prostate cancer.
So people, So I think it's difficult to say things for definite, as with kind of anything in medicine. People that have, finasteride was discovered really because it's used as a prostate medication. But generally speaking, because it's considered to be hormonal treatment, people that have prostate cancer generally wouldn't take the medication. But I think that the links to finasteride in younger years and having prostate cancer later in life, I think it's quite tenuous. I don't think there's a great amount of data to say that it's much of a risk factor. But as with lots of types of cancer that are under the influence of hormones, because of affecting a hormone system, you would generally kind of avoid if you were more at risk person. If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, you've already said as well, like in terms of finasteride, it's usually under 5% of people that experience kind of any side effects at all. But also side effects are prevalent with any drug that you're taking. So I guess it's to be taken in the same way that you would take most other things, correct?
Yeah, yeah, essentially. Yeah. Do you have many people that, because you're a stylist, do you have kind of friends and people in your circle that take finasteride?
I don't know.
All right. Maybe they'll tell you afterwards.
Exactly, which is why I wanted to do this, because it was actually only once an editor, and this is I won't say where, but an editor once said to me, and my hair was bleached at the time and still cropped quite short, but I think it had grown in a lot at the front. So it was probably very noticeable, because I even look back at photographs now before I started taking it when I was 24, 23. I'm really shocked at the difference now. Like, I have so much more hair now. And I think he said to me, he approached me at an event that I was involved in, and it was peroxide white at the time. And he said, "Oh, have you had a hair transplant?" And I said, "No." Taken aback. And I wasn't going to tell him why or how or what I'd done, because it was so taboo or whatever. Also, like, it was none of his business. But he said, "Oh, so then you're on finasteride?" And I went, "Sorry?" Like, I was really taken aback. But he was quite upfront about it. And he said, "Well, I've been on for years." He said, "You can totally see the difference. Keep doing whatever it is you're doing." And I went, "Oh, thanks." And he said, "I genuinely thought maybe you'd gone and had a hair transplant." He says, "Because it's that noticeable." And I couldn't believe, because I wasn't even aware. It was only kind of at that point that I decided to then look at the older photographs and go, "Whoa, like, there is obviously there is a difference here." And it's things like that kind of, I suppose, show that it can be a success story. So I suppose, yeah, today was about, asking what male pattern baldness or male pattern hair loss is, what treatments there are available, because I know you guys do certain packages. So I know I'm on the finasteride and the gummies package, but there's also I have the shampoo as well. Apologies. So there's many different things that you can do. So talk to me now about what each of the components does and why they're important. So, for example, in my pack, I have the tablet, the finasteride tablet. I have the gummies, and I also have the shampoo. So in that, I've got the internal, the medication. I've got the internal in terms of the gummies, which are vitamins and minerals, and then I also have the external, or the topical, which is the shampoo.
Yeah, so I suppose an easy way to explain it is that the gummies are essentially like building blocks for the hair. The minoxidil is kind of the blood supply, which is going to feed the hair and allow it to grow, and the finasteride helps prevent the hair follicle from shrinking and keep it nice and expanded so that hair can continue to grow from that follicle.
So I noticed since taking the gummies that my scalp is permanently itchy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Is that a good thing?
It depends. If that's the case, it would be good for someone to kind of have a look at the scalp just to see if you've got any kind of dermatitis or.
No, it's not. It's not like it's not an external itch. It's like an internal. Does that make sense? It's not like, because I would notice it washing my hair. There's no flakiness, no skin. There's nothing like that. There's no dandruff. It's more like I can't. Or maybe I'm not describing it right. It's not like it's not like an itch you'd want to scratch. It's just more of a tingle. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there are other kind of dietary ways to get those vitamins. So if you feel that you are potentially having something related to the gummies, then you could always have a kind of a trial period off. If it goes away and then you reintroduce it and it came back, then maybe it is having a bit of a side effect that doesn't agree with you.
I thought it was a positive thing. I thought maybe it was just the blood going up to the scalp.
I don't think so. That's a nice way of looking at it, though.
Really? So you don't think it's increased blood flow?
I don't think that's something that you would feel per se.
Oh, okay.
It'll be on too small a level for you to have kind of a physical feeling from it.
And so mixed with the finasteride, it wouldn't be that?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, it doesn't jump out to me.
A female friend before told me she took some other hair gummies that she saw advertised, and she had the same thing. She was having that kind of tingly feeling, But
All
then
right.
she started to see new hairs, so she was like, it must be them working.
Fair enough.
It's not a bad thing. It's not like, I find it quite nice because I'm like, oh, it's working.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if it's not something that is kind of a bothersome thing, then I don't see any. I don't think there's. Matt, have you had any other reports of issues?
No, I mean, so the biotin gummies, the way they work, it's all around fueling the hair follicles. So it's the building blocks of the actual proteins that build up the cells, rather than sort of blood flow. So perhaps it's from something else. I mean, the shampoo that's got DHT, sort of anti-DHT properties from a topical perspective. So that, I think, it's got copper peptide, which is believed to have sort of ingredients that stimulate blood flow, so it possibly could be from that, but yeah, I don't think it'll be from the biotin. We haven't heard it from other people.
Okay. I was just going to say on the prostate cancer front, because that's probably something that can scare people. I think there's been some studies recently which has shown that I think they're using it as finasteride as prostate cancer prevention, actually. So it's something that can decrease the rates. But it might be worth me doing a short piece on that, Matt, at some point.
Yeah.
Because that's if that's a kind of a question if that's something that comes up on Google and is a question in mind, so it'd be good to put some clarity on it.
Definitely.
Cool.
That was everything that I had.
Cool.
Wanted to add.
Excellent. No, I know it's really, really interesting listening in, actually, guys. Thank you very much for your time.